Sandra Goldstein, she was the first installed president of the commercial RCA. So this first woman president of this organization. Tony Puente, Miami-Dade College Hall of Fame member, outstanding contribution of real estate. And we have Rafael, and I didn't know about Rafael until yesterday. He's a 5-year veteran of the United States Navy. I didn't know that, so congratulations, thanks for your service. When I was reading his bio, I said, oh man, I know him for like 4 or 5 years, and I didn't know this about you. So that's why I like you very much. We're gonna start. Well, everybody likes him. We're gonna start with Sandra. What I want Sandra to do is to tell us what's going on. What's going on in the market, what's going on in what we do, and from there we'll take it. I'll have some questions afterwards. And all right, Sandra, go ahead.
Thank you for this opportunity. A friend of mine, Ellen Kempler, once told me, who's a teacher, she said, teach what you want to learn. So I'm not a robot. I do things the old-fashioned way. I read articles, I talk to people, I talk to their nannies, I talk to their masseuses, I speak to their attorneys and their accountants, and I read the newspapers. And of course, I look at information that's provided to us with our technology. And so this is my perspective of Miami-Dade County. But we have to look at the backdrop of what's happening to us. Miami has arrived as a global city. We're on a par with New York, London, and Singapore. And the things that are happening to us globally are affecting us. Oil prices are lowering. Brexit has changed the economy. There are investors who are looking for preservation of capital. We have jobs that are wanted here. We need affordable housing in this area. And we have investors from Russia, Japan. We have them coming in from Qatar. United Arab Emirates are buying properties here. And in addition to New York, New Jersey, the usual places, Brooklyn, we have investors coming in from Denver, San Diego, Texas, Chicago, Milwaukee. It's really amazing what is focusing here in Miami. And the thing that seems to be centered for us are land prices. People are buying land like never before, and the prices are crazy. They're going all over the map. And sooner or later, the question is not going to be, what is the hottest property in Miami, but what's the driest property? If you were to look at land prices on a scale of monopoly, you would have to say that the Design District and Wynwood are the Park Place and Broadway of the board. And if you looked at Hialeah and Northwest Dade, you would say that's probably Mediterranean. And the things that are happening along South Dixie Highway with transit-oriented development purchases and land in Coral Gables and further down South Dixie, that would be Atlantic. So let me give you some ideas of what the land prices are in coming into this past year. In the area between Northwest 2nd Avenue and North Miami Avenue, and between 22nd and 27th Streets, sales are based on an average of $650 to a high of $1,561 a square foot based on land, and between $1,200 and $1,780 per square foot buildable for existing product. Red Sky Capital Buyer in September this year just paid $30 million, a direct sale with Jessica Goldman. They paid $565 a square foot for a 1.5 acre piece. That was a 3,000% increase from what the property had traded for in 2013. Red Ski, which is a Brooklyn-based company in joint venture with their London partner, is now likely the second largest owner in Wynwood. CoStar shows that they own about $250 million worth of real estate. Second only probably to Dakra, that's in combination with the Ashkenazi, and the L Equities people who own 70% of the property in the design district. And that's followed closely by Moshe Mana, who owns probably almost $250 million worth of real estate in 30 different properties, not only in Wynwood, but also in Flagler. East End Capital also purchased in Wynwood. They paid $14.5 million for 3 warehouses in Wynwood, and they also just purchased 100 Biscayne Boulevard, the office building, for $84 million. They like to be close to their projects. On another, Alta Developers in South Miami paid $14.4 million. That was a trade by Lika Sikos as the broker. They assembled 3 parcels of land for $200 a square foot. And then interestingly, NP Developers, they're from Milwaukee, they bought 5 acres from Jeff Berkowitz, and they're planning a mixed-use development. It's one of those transit-oriented developments that are sprouting up along South Dixie Highway. They've paid close to $500 a square foot. Another transit-oriented development in that area is the parcel that Gus Machado sold to Trio Developers. And they're going to be building about 100,000 square feet. In fact, I think that one of our speakers here, Tony, can speak to that because he's involved in the leasing of that property. But those things are really very interesting. Now, contrast that with the sales that have happened in Hialeah and Northwest Dade. Jose Juncadella just sold a piece of property that was on the market for 30 days for $50 million, a 50-acre tract of land to Kadena, which will be a very large housing development. And not to be outbid, Lennar just closed on a 250-acre property, bought in 2 different sales, and they're paying between $10 and $11 a square foot. So you have these varying disparate prices that drive a person like myself crazy, because anymore, where can you measure the value of real estate and how can you really tell? It really doesn't matter what's happened before, it's the future. People are looking to the future. And there's lots of money looking for fewer and fewer properties. The other thing that I'd like to talk about are office buildings. And Tony is certainly going to be talking about that, but just let me touch on the kind of investor that's coming in. In December of last year, Ponte Gadea Biscayne LLC bought the Southeast Financial Building. They paid $430 a square foot, one of the highest prices paid. The other gentleman talked about Zara. This is the man who created Zara. His name is Ortega. He's an 80-year-old man. He's a billionaire many, many, many times over. And so he's from Spain. He's come over here because he's looking for the most important thing to him, and that's capital preservation. So he's bought this trophy property, and he is going to, it's about 85% leased, and he's put his money where his mouth is. He's also bought a block of property on Lincoln Road and paid the highest price a couple of years ago. So he is probably has invested almost $1 billion in Miami so far. Not to be outdone, Sumitomo, that's a Japanese company, purchased the Miami Tower, and they paid about $380 a square foot. A building that I think is really interesting is a little further south. That's 4 Dayton Center. That sold for $150 million, and that's been reported at a 6 cap. And those prices, the property was 80% occupied, and the rents are between $38 and $41. Now, what's as interesting as what people are buying is the motivation that why are people selling? Because I find it hard to find sellers who are interested in selling their property. They want to hold on to it because they're concerned about what do they put their money into. So Dayton Center bought this at a 6.1 cap. They saw real potential, as Ken Rosen says, for upside value, and certainly that market is great for someone. They wanted to buy it because it was away from the urban core. 1221 Brickell just sold for $380 a square foot. It sold in April. How am I doing for time? I don't want to take away from... Okay.
I see your notes.
So Here's another thing. Shopping centers have been really great, as well as rental properties. A shopping center that I think is really interesting, beside the Doral Plaza that just recently sold for $600 a square foot at 41st Street and 97th Avenue, that was sold because the owner, the Leka, is a Sweden firm. They're getting rid of all their properties. So that's a good motivation for them. But I like Steve Battel's property at Sunnyland. Who among us haven't shopped at Sunnyland? He just sold that property for $800 a square foot at a 4.9 cap. So the interesting thing is, someone asked Steve, well, why did you sell that property? You owned it for 20 years. He said, it just realized at market, I realized my potential. And yet the one who is buying it is saying there's still more potential there. Because again, capital is looking for a way to invest and preserve their capital. And so I'm going to defer.
I was just going to add something before and then you listen in the news or people talking that we're not have a dynamic city, that we are entering a bad cycle, that the economy is not doing great in Miami. We are in Miami. We're in the hottest cities in the world right now. We're going to go with Tony and then for age only, right? Tony, let's talk about something. Let's talk about office, if you don't mind. And I have a couple of, you start with saying what you think cap rates are, what's trading, how do you like it, how do you see it? And then I ask a question that I have prepared for you that I can give you.
No problem. Well, good morning, and thank you all for staying. I know it's been a long event, and I know that the prior presentations were a lot more appealing in certain ways with new projects and so forth. So
there's a raffle. That's why they're
here. I
knew there was a trick. So
they think lunch is being served.
I just want to do a little bit of takeoff on what Sandra said. And that was a great introduction, a great presentation, and a great overview of really what's happening in terms of land values and rise in values of buildings and so forth. But when my clients ask me why, what's going on, why has Miami achieved such a status and so forth, and two things really come to mind, and two tidbits maybe that you guys can take away, and maybe things you haven't heard before. But one for sure is somehow or another over the last 10 years, Miami stopped being a city, stopped being a destination, stopped being a tourist town. Miami is just a brand. It is one of the most recognizable names anywhere in the world. People want to be associated with Miami. People want to be in Miami. People want to work in Miami. People want to be associated with the boom that's going in Miami, anywhere in the world. And Sandra said it earlier, just the name itself. In fact, you say the word Miami in a lot of cities in South America or in Europe or Asia, and really Miami's from, North Palm Beach County all the way to Key West. To them, it doesn't, they don't differentiate, they don't differentiate what the city of Miami is. But ultimately, the city of Miami is where it all starts and where all the vibrance is and so forth. It's been an unbelievable change in the office world over the last 5 years. We had the Great Recession. Everything was in the doldrums. We stopped building office buildings. I think we delivered the last three, probably 2008, 2009 buildings, or three significant buildings, two on Brickell Avenue and one in downtown Miami that were finally, started in 05, 06 and finally delivered in 08 and 09. For 1.5 million, 2 million square feet. That's the last significant construction of office buildings that was built. And then obviously, we've seen what unemployment has done and gone down over the last, I think we're under 5% now in terms of a community and a city here. We went from a high of probably, 25, 30% vacancy rates as a city to now 12%. Some research reports are tracking it at 9, 10%. There's some pockets like Coconut Grove, like South Miami, like Coral Gables is going through right now, which are now way under 10%. Coconut Grove's at a 5%, South Miami's at a 5%. Coral Gables is probably going to be, at a 9, 8% as we speak, and probably a lot lower here over the next, 18 months with the amount of activity in the office. And these are existing companies that are growing, along with new to market companies that are coming. Recently from California, we had a big group that relocated their offices from California here, Latin American office, for over 150, 200 employees in the 355 Hamburg building and so forth. So along with vacancy dropping to those really significant low vacancy rates, the amount of buildings that have been completed or are in the pipeline for construction is still minimal compared to our, I call it a 50 million square foot market in terms of buildings greater than 30,000 feet that are in the A and B categories, not necessarily the C and the smaller medical buildings and government buildings and so forth, because the market, is over 100 million square feet when you include all the buildings. There's definitely, it's become a landlord's market. It's going to continue to be a landlord's market over the next 2 to 3 years as some of these developments that have been announced start to break ground. Sandra mentioned Somi Station. That's one of our clients that has bought the air rights on a 99-year lease for the on top of the existing parking garage at the South Miami Metro Rail Station. And the air rights, there is one triangular piece of land also where they're going to be building a 100-unit residential, probably student housing complex, and a 200,000 square foot office/medical office building, on that site. It's going through final approvals now with the county and so forth. It's actually a Miami-Dade County piece because it's on the Metro Rail Station. And Sandra mentioned all the Metro Rail Station points of egress and ingress are all under development and so forth. That goes along with what Jeff was saying earlier and so forth. Everybody wants to be concentrated in these urban areas. Everybody wants access to transportation, alternative forms of transportation. Obviously, the driverless cars that eventually will take over, for our driving and so forth. So the office market, if you're a landlord, they're coasting right now, raising rents, lowering concessions. Rents have probably appreciated in a lot of markets 10% a year for the last 3 years. I mean, that's significant. Let's say high-end Brickell Avenue or downtown probably was in the under $40 a foot gross in the Great Recession. It's probably closer to $60 now for some of the better buildings, some of the better spaces within the better buildings with water views and so forth, and increasing exponentially as we speak, because those amount of spaces are limited. There's not a lot. So if you're a company that needs that kind of building, those kind of views, and those kind of amenities in these large office buildings, then that's what it takes to get into those buildings and so forth.
Let me just, we cannot talk about offices without talking about shared space. Mm-hmm. How do you see the shared space growing? And I was reading a couple of days ago that the problem that you have with shared space is how bankable are those spaces, because the bank, I mean, it's a long-term lease with a very short-term subleases, let's say.
Right.
So how do you see
it? I mean, historically, what we've always called executive space sharing has been a part of our market forever, for 30 years since I've been in the business and so forth. Before the Great Recession and prior to that, they were always kind of the tenant of last resort for a lot of landlords, and I represented some of those transactions in downtown Miami in 92, 94, where we had a space that wasn't leasable, it was a sublease situation from a major corporation downsizing in Miami. We would go out and look for those shared executive spaces. So they would fill the gap, but they were never considered long-term tenants. What happened is this industry, these groups have done a great job of giving the right experience to these individuals and companies that are in their housing, being housed in their offices. They took advantage of a high vacancy market in 2007, 8, and 9, when we were in 25, 30, 40% vacancies in some buildings, 50% vacancies, and provided a service and a product that caught on fire. It is unbelievable. They're probably, in terms of considering that their industry as a tenant, they're one of the biggest growing tenants that we've had, industries that we've had over the last 10 years. I can't tell you a building or a market where if they're not in already, they're knocking on the door trying to get in. And from a financing perspective, historically, yes, that was an issue. But for instance, the WeWorks of the world and the Regencies of the world, which are public entities now, they're backed by Wall Street. That's no longer the case. I can tell you institutional landlords that are very happy to have them as a tenant, and they feel that business model is here to stay. And as Miami grows and attracts businesses from all over the world, a lot of times, and also, I'll get back to another point, short-term leases are more popular than they've ever been because of the uncertainty of the future of the world, number one. We've also had we're undergoing some accounting changes, some federal accounting changes that are going to take place January 1st, 2019, that are going to basically have corporations put long-term lease liabilities in their balance sheets, which it didn't do before. So ownership by some companies will become more valuable to them in terms of how their books look, and I'm not an expert on that, but you're going to see more and more in that. And I think the public companies will take effect January 1st of 19, and then the private entities a year down the road and so forth. So that's also going to affect how sublease is used. So landlords have to start, just like we're looking at garages and seeing what kind of alternative use down the road they could be. And I think we heard residential for the American Dream Miami. which is interesting. We're also looking at, landlords have to accept that shorter term leases are something they have to deal with if they're going to keep their buildings occupied. And again, a lot of these tenants will roll over for 10 or 15 years, but it's going to be in 3 to 5 year increments over time and so forth.
Thank you. Rafael, now is your turn.
I need a question or something.
What's your name?
These folks brought prepared speeches. I got nothing.
I got nothing.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
I'm Rafael. I'm Vice President of Retail at Continental Real Estate Companies. I'm here to talk about the retail piece. The hot topic of, it seems like the hot topic of today was that my business will cease to exist inside of my lease at home.
And you're going to live to be 150.
We will see. We will see. The unemployment at my house will be 100%. Right. So I mean, obviously, I disagree. This is a room full of real estate professionals. So we don't get to watch CNN and say the retail meltdown is happening because there's X amount of malls closing down, because there's X amount of Macy's closing down. The American Dream is building a bunch of stuff, that's great, but what they're building on the residential side, that's all that they're doing outside of retail. Bowling, restaurants, theme parks, all of it is retail. So they can sit there and say that they're building 1 million square feet of small shop space, and that's stupid, and that might be the case, but they're building 3 million square feet of retail. If they're telling you anything different, that's not right. 17% only is what regional malls represent of all retail. So if you were to sit here and you were to say, fine, half of all malls will go broke. Dateline goes away, Aventura sticks around, and that goes on throughout the entire country. You're talking about with a national vacancy rate of 5%, we're still doing pretty good. We're still never going to reach the vacancy rates that the office sector reached in the Great Recession. We are not in any kind of trouble. I mean, and at the end of the day, the meltdown sells newspapers or newsletters or emails or whatever people are reading now. But find me a dead Circuit City. Where are the dead Blockbusters? Where are the dead, most recently, where are the dead Sports Authorities? We fill them as fast as we get them back. We fill them with all kinds of different retail. We fill them with gyms. We fill them with movie theaters. We fill them with bowling. We fill them with whatever you got. It's all retail. The reason why we get more press is because nobody at home in Wisconsin is affected when a Regis goes broke in downtown Miami. But all of a sudden, you got to figure out where you're going to go get your groceries. Now that affects you at home in Wisconsin. It affects you everywhere. The moderator before did this great exercise, and it was real impacting. He said, raise your hands if you're an Amazon Prime member. I would challenge you to raise your hand if you did groceries this week.
I did.
Nobody.
Nobody did groceries. Damn it.
Whoa.
All right, we got one person.
But I think Jose said something very interesting. Danny, 2 seconds. I think Jose Cuncadella said something very interesting that only, I wrote it, 9% of the retail is e-commerce. 9%. So yes, they have a long time to grow, and they have it's a booming business, but still we go to the retail stores.
What about medical?
Absolutely. I mean, every service use that you see out there, medical, pediatric, we just did. It's funny, Sandra mentioned 2 shopping centers, they're all Plaza and Sunnyland, and we manage and lease both of those. So I mean, at Sunnyland, for example, the Miami Children's took over 2 floors at Sunnyland. That's retail. I mean, it's the urgent cares, all of it is retail. So at the end of the day, out of 100 potential stores, we've got 3.5 stores vacant today. And you can ask anyone that's out there looking for space that it's not easy. We don't do the type of concessions that they do on the industrial and the office side. It is a very, very tight market. Nationwide, we're at 5%. In Miami-Dade County, we're at 3.5% vacancy.
And what are the rates?
Rates are only going up, and they're very, very dependent on the market. But you've got as high as $300, $350 a square foot in the design district, and as low as teens in some other markets. Like,
Danny has a question.
Couple of questions. First of all, I think you did a great job from downtown Dayton. I go there all the time. It's phenomenal what you've done. You know, Sandy's Pool, Sunnyland, when Paradoga sold it, I have 2 clients in that mall. They're paying $100 a foot rent. Wagons West, which is a little muffin coffee shop, is paying $100 a foot rent. So it's effective. You know, these people are buying these malls. These are triple net leases. So the next year, when taxes come down, insurance comes down, it's very hard for these people to stay in business. Some of the rents, and I come from Windward. I'm a Windward fan. I'm friends with Red Sky. I drove around with Michael, and I said, Michael, explain this to me, because I'm a CCIM, and I do not understand these numbers. And Michael said to me, we're in the 3rd inning of a 9th-inning ball game. And I thought we were in double overtime. So, you know, I think we're going to have, what, over 60,000 condos permitted in Dade County. Whatever those get built, you know, dollars strong. A lot of those are going to, I'm putting a fund together to buy foreclosed condos in the next couple of years. I think we're going to go in for a recession. I sell industrial real estate. Industrial real estate is great. We have 3% vacancy. I can't talk people into market because they can't find what to do with their money.
But you're speaking about apartments, Danny, and so what's happening is...
But they're going to be rentals at $3,000
Exactly.
for somebody that paid $4 million for a condo. So I think that's going to affect I mean, Tony might know better than me or maybe Ralph, but I think that's going to affect the commercial real estate, especially retail. And hotels, Airbnb, it's going to change. It's changing very quickly.
Yeah,
in Windward,
at the beginning of the presentation.
$70 a foot triple net rent.
One of the biggest challenges that I see for us, even if you have designation CCIM and you pretend that you understand this, is that there is no way to put a deal together with your mind together. The numbers don't add up. But yet, look at the Sandra's statistics. So, I think one of the problems that we have is perception. That we still think that Miami is not what what it is, but we don't know exactly what Miami is. Miami is not the Miami that we know from the past. Miami is New York, Miami is Milan, Miami is, and even some more dynamics here because we are a very new city. And that's my view. You know? I'm not
I want to address Danny's question, though.
Yes.
The Wagons West has been there for 20 years or so. You're talking about one of the single most successful restaurants at Sunnyland. I'm not going to sit here and spread out what their sales per square foot are, but they're fine. The reason why the malls are in such deep trouble, and the mall guys are gone, and I was hoping that they would be here. Simon, General Growth, and Westfield did it to themselves. I worked at Simon prior to Craig, so I know exactly what's going on. The benchmark at the mall, in the mall business is you want your operators to be between 18 and 22% occupancy cost, higher in the food court. I heard recently that Cam at Aventura Mall is up to $100 a foot, just the Cam. These guys are doing it to themselves. They have entire meetings to talk about how to drive up occupancy costs, how to get these guys to pay more. The problem with e-commerce, and it's 8% that they are as a portion of total sales. I looked it up last night because I was nervous about today.
So you did prepare.
Yes, I looked up the one stat because I figured that's where they were going to ding me on. Amazon.
That's why I quoted Jose. It's not my number.
Right. But the deal with that is, so if you've got somebody operating at 22% occupancy cost, and then all of a sudden you take away, call it a direct effect, you take away 8% of their sales, and now all of a sudden they're not doing the volume that they were doing, you're putting people out of business. So the lion's share of the vacancy that's going to hit the market to the tune of 50 million square feet is Macy's, Sears, JCPenney. All of these guys are operating inside of malls, but also you've got the BCBGs, you've got the BBs, you've got all of these other guys that are operating inside of a mall. So if you go into your mall and you see a tenant that operates exclusively inside the mall, you can safely say that those guys are or will be at some point in trouble. And that's just a fact.
We have the last question for Ken.
Oh, about sea level rise. So I kind of passed it off because we own some choice properties in Coral Gables, and You know, we're building in Doral, but I wouldn't buy anything on Miami Beach because it's so low without her being concerned. But you see in the media now, and the first speaker, I guess he was from the Knight Frank organization, who said that 100 years from now there won't be a place called Earth. It'll disappear. So she is urging me to sell all the properties that we have in Miami-Dade County and reinvest in higher areas like Asheville, North Carolina.
Or the moon.
And I'm looking at a deal in Asheville. It's a phenomenal deal, not because of Seawise, because it's something else. But what impact? I mean, the realtors and the developers don't want to talk about this particularly. And I don't think it's going to happen right away. But at some point, if the media starts to talk about Seawise, what do you think the impact on investors is going to be around the world for Miami? Because Miami may be underwater in 20, 30, 40, 50 years.
This is you guys. I can be funny about this, but this is all you guys.
Reply and then just say a couple of things because we're out of time.
It's a tough one. Right?
I will say one thing about it. I think we have to have a story, we have to have a narrative on things that are being done in Miami Beach, in Dade County, in all three counties, because things are being done, and there's drainage and things like that, and there are going to be solutions in the future, some of which be public-private and some not, but I think we need to at least have that narrative. We need to be able to answer that question when somebody asks us. We actually are looking at doing a position paper, which we've already started and collated, so that you can have that information if somebody asks you.
Maybe that's why equipment prices are so high. Maybe mine
A little higher.
Okay. John, no, very quickly, John.
You're 8 feet above sea level.
Yeah, to that I would just say, though, we really need to build buildings now. They cost a little more money. As I started to say before, it's a little harder to finance it. But you build it so it can be built on top of. The sea level rise is not going up 50 feet. It's going up 5 feet. It's going up 10 feet. It's still enough to flood all of Miami, but it's not enough to cover a 50-story building. It's not even enough to cover a 30-foot warehouse. You build them so that they can be built on top of it.
You guys, I think sea level rise is going to be 5 centimeters. We're
Sell your buildings now, I'll give you sell your buildings now, and I'll give you $20 a foot for each one.
Wait, thank you very much, guys. Sorry we don't have enough time.